Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Stately Office Hours. This is what we do the same time every week. This week, we're all back in roughly the same time zone, so I think we're sort of know what we're doing, even though we're on different parts of the world. And what we do is we talk about what's going on at Stately and with XState. We answer your questions. Sometimes we give demos and basically talk about whatever we want to talk about. If you've got any questions, you can ask us in the YouTube live comments. You could ask us on Twitter using hashtag Stately Office Hours. Or if you want to join our Discord, if you are not there already, you can go to discord.gg/xstate. And that is where we hang out all of the time. It's where our community is. And you can ask a question in the dedicated Office Hours channel there. So why don't we just start off with some very quick team introductions? I know we do them every week, but I'm aware that some of you might not have been here before. You might not know who we are and why we're talking. So I'll start off with me. I'm Laura Kalbag, and I do developer and designer relations for Stately. I'm a designer and developer myself. And how about you, David?
Yeah, I'm David, the founder of Stately, creator of XState, and just dreaming up some big ideas for us to work on.
And Matt?
I'm Matt. I'm debating whether I can eat this chocolate bar during the office hours. I don't think I can, but I'm a developer and developer for Stately.
What is the chocolate bar?
It is quite a fancy one. It is Tony's. It's one I got for my birthday,
nice.
which was a week ago, right? Yeah, God.
Yeah, we celebrated here. You weren't here. We celebrated it without you.
Yeah, we did. So
I should watch it back. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a Tony's chocolate with nuggets, I think. So
nice.
I'm intrigued.
Very nice.
Sounds tasty. So the first thing we should talk about this week is there is an input pull request that Matt has been working on. I think it's Matt. Matt said that he would explain all about it because I have no idea what it is.
Yep, sounds good. All I've told Laura is it's an input PR. Who knows what that means? But essentially what it is, it's a PR to the way that the XState works that helps with a few different things. I've been talking about this PR for a while. Laura, I'm guessing you've put my screen up so you can see what I see. Or maybe I haven't yet. There we go. So yeah, I've lost all your faces. All I can see is my code now.
Oh.
No, it's not your fault.
They've changed the interface. They've confused me.
No, it's all
Thank you, StreamWorld. We're back.
Back. Okay, so the idea of input is that it makes a few things easier in XState. The idea currently is that in order to declare dependencies to your machine, let's say you have a component in React, for instance. So this component looks like this. I'm just going to change this file to a TSX file. And the component takes in an ID as prompts, for instance. So ID string. And this is like view user by ID, for instance. We've all built one of these pages before, or view anything by ID. Now, if you were using something like, I don't know, like React Query, let's say, that has an interface like this, like use query, and then you fetch the thing by ID. So you say fetch by plus ID, then, or props to ID rather, then this kind of traditionally has been very hard to make work with XState because you have the result of your query here. For instance, you have data, but then when you go to const state equal to use machine, how do you actually sync it with your with the data that's coming from use query? The traditional way to do that has been to grab send from in here and to go use effect data, or no, hang on, can't even type a use effect anymore. Send type receive data to the machine, and this helps keep the data up to date. But you see just how many lines of code this is, how clunky this feels. You probably chose XState because you hated use effects and the way that they affect your code, and every use effect that's in your code can cause a problem because of you've got to manage this list of dependencies. You've got to it's just painful, really. So I wanted a way that I could just say inside my machine. Let's imagine we have this machine here, and I'm just going to comment out this code so you can just ignore it safely. Now, inside this, what I wanted was a way that I could just grab this data and just use it inside my machine. That's what I was aiming for. And I think I've come up with a way, or we've come up with a way that we can do that. So I've got this model at the top here. Create model, if you've not used it before, is useful for declaring kind of types for XState. It's our kind of chosen way of using TypeScript with XState. And I've added this method here. This, by the way, isn't in XState yet. This is just a PR that I've made to XState. So this is on my branch in the XState core. I've added a method here, which is called withInput. And that withInput, we're going to pass it the ID, because that's like the ID from our user ID there. In fact, let's just call it user ID. And I'm going to pass in the data. And I might have data, and the data might be like user, name, string, for instance. It might look like that. Or we might have nothing. So that's why I declared it like this. So now what I can do is I can say, let's actually just get rid of this for now and go back here. And I can say view user by ID. And I'm actually just going to copy this over to the XState React repo. Sorry, I should have probably put it in there originally. Let's put it in source here, test.tsx. This all looks fine. We just need to use machine from the other file, not from SM, from there. Okay, so now we have use machine. And inside here, we will get input. And that input is strongly typed to all the things that we specified in our input here. So we have user ID and data. So we have inputs. So let's say user ID is going to be props.id, and data is going to be from the query here. So inside our machine now, let's say we have an initial state of idle, states idle here. And let's imagine that we have an always here that's checking something. So this always, let's say we have a, oh no, that's in the wrong place. We have always. So basically, we're going to check inside this condition. If we have the data, then go to the has data state. So let's add the has data. And the idea here is maybe idle is a bad name. We can call it pending instead. So we have a pending state and a has data state. And the condition is going to go context event. And then we've got access to the state in here. The state, we can return state.input.data, and we just return that as a Boolean. So what that's doing is it's checking whether the input has been passed with the data. And when it has, it does this on every tick of the state machine, then we can go to the has data state. And this state.input is available on every single implementation in XState. So you can do this on actions, you can do this on services, you can do this on guards and delays. What that means is that everything that you pass in via an input into the machine will get updated on every render, meaning that you'll always have access to the props that you pass in like this. And as you can see, it's completely type safe too if you use create model. So you have access to all that stuff. I find this incredibly exciting. This kind of allows you to do what you can do in React, which is have a difference between props and state. So props are input, where you can just pass them in and just the dependencies will just flush through. And you can also use state for your context as well. So context is the same as it's always been. It's just the things that are local to your machine that you don't have to sync anymore. So there's no more syncing context, none of that stuff. You just pass in your dependencies via inputs. So I'm excited about this. I'm also keen to know kind of what David thinks of this too. David, we had kind of a long few discussions sort of hashing this out. And I think you're thinking about other applications as well for it, David, aren't you?
Yeah, so this is the evolution that, again, after many talks with Matt from, what was it called? Sync to context or something like that. So originally it was conceptualized as a React-specific feature to fulfill a very common user need of doing something exactly like this, where having the boilerplate of use effect was just really annoying to do. So instead, like this input over here in the use machine, it's going to automatically send an event to to the machine. So everything still follows the state machine semantics that we have in XState. So we're not breaking any rules here, and also this doesn't affect context. So one thing that was an absolute no-no was like having a magical way to automatically update context wherever we want, because that sort of breaks the rules of state machines, but this is different. This is sort of like props, just like Matt said in React, where you can't change the props, but props can come to you arbitrarily, and their values are their values. And so context in the machine would be more akin to local state, like what you get from useState or useReducer. So basically, we got that sync to context idea, and we transformed it to make it more useful, even like not even just in React, but in for other use cases too. So yeah, one of the biggest use cases I was thinking and talking about with Mateusz, who is not here today because it is Polish Independence Day, I believe, is that right now, the way that you instantiate a machine with data is you're just plopping it directly into context. And so now context becomes this store for both local data, which sort of should be private, and data that comes from the outside. So it, like, the distinction is sort of unclear there. And so that's why we have input and context as two separate things. And so, yeah, I don't know what I was going to say, but input is an important concept, just for separating those two notions of data coming in, and also the data that's being stored inside the machine.
It lets us. Sorry, Laura, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, Horacio said, nice one, more goodies to release React from Logic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, damn right. It's interesting too. Like, we're starting to think about state machines as useful in the back end, and specifically the idea that you could, let's say, take an API endpoint and implement the entire functionality of it just using XState. And if you think about it, an API endpoint in its most simplest case is a function. It takes in an input and it spits out an output. And state machines as they currently are, or not state machines as they currently are, but XState as it currently is, can do that, but it's not very intuitive. It doesn't have first-class API support. And we're thinking about input and output as kind of things that we can bring into XState properly. Like, let's imagine input here is in React, and it's kind of like props that flush through. But input in an API endpoint would be the things that you receive on the body of the post request, for instance. And we're still kind of chewing over ideas for what that output would look like. But the idea is that you can like have an entire API just written in XState, just purely have it fully type safe and have all your logic visualizable.
Yeah, and I also, if I could share my screen, I want to share like one of the inspirations for just thinking about input and output. So let me just
Whoop. Let me know when I can tab back over.
Sorry, my thing. I'm still on my old computer. I got the new MacBook, but I just haven't set it up yet. So anyway, okay. So if you see Node-RED is a really interesting programming environment where you basically represent things as these nodes, and it is a highly visual thing. I'm just not sure why it's showing sort of bland screenshots. But anyway, there is actually let's go to images here. So just to give you a demonstration of like what Node-RED looks like, it's these nodes that you have over here, and each of these nodes have an input and an output. And people have actually made like XState nodes for Node-RED. And so I like, in thinking through input and output, a state machine can be something that takes in input and pushes out output, and like just whatever goes inside the state machine, that's up to the state machine. It has its own local state. It could send events to things, etc. But yeah, that was one of the biggest inspirations for that. So just wanted to show that.
So Horacio asked, what about making something more explicit in the machine, like on input instead of always?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen again. This is just a battle of the screen shares.
Well, I'll hide that message so we can actually see your face.
Yeah, good idea. There we go. Nice. So yeah, you're right. There is something missing from my demonstration here, which is you can do like an on and I think it's been a while since I actually looked at this PR, but it's going to be something like XState.input. So when there's a new input, it will fire an event, and you can subscribe to that event and just read the new input. I don't think it will be on the event. I think it will be something like, so like actions, and then you'll have context, event, and state. And it will be there, and the input already will be updated. So the idea is that you can, if you want to, just sort of sync up to the specific event that changes there. But in this case, it's kind of just simpler to use the always, really. So yeah, you will have a method available for doing that, Horatio.
As John says, the PR seemed like another good idea by smart person, but now can see the immediate use cases.
Oh, that's good. That's kind of like a compliment and an insult at the same time. So it seems like a useless PR by a genius, but now I can see it working.
Yeah, a lot of the ideas that we think of actually come from the community in indirect ways, where we see a lot of problems that the community is trying to solve. So we just think through solutions, and we can't just make a one-off solution where it's like, oh, okay, I'll add that feature, because these are things that really need to be thought through. And there's also like the rules of state machines that have to be strictly followed. So finding creative ways to, implement solutions without breaking rules. Yeah. And this is just one of them. And there's plenty more. We have a lot more PRs that are still, being digested that, might come to fruition.
Mm.
So we got some good questions this week from Horacio, who's really been asking all the goodies in the Office Hours channel on Discord. And so I thought I would ask some of them. Now, because they're in our Discord, I've not got a great way of bringing the questions up on screen. So I'm just going to try to read them clearly, and you're going to tell me if I'm not reading it well enough. So Horacio says, question for the next Office Hours. I see that in the Viz app, you create React providers for many XState services. How do you compare that approach to having one root machine with all those service references in the root extended state, in brackets, root context?
Well, Horatio is referring to the kind of structure of the code that we've written for the Viz, which is a React app. It's built in Next, and it uses XState extensively. So we're not just pushing XState on other people, we'll use it ourselves as well. And the idea is, should you have just one machine at the very root of your app, which does everything? So like, which manages global state, which manages routing, which manages everything. Or should you break it up a little bit into smaller machines that just handle small bits of that? We chose, and what we've done is we've broken it up into smaller bits. So the main reasons for that are, first of all, it's nice to split things into modules, basically. So it's nice for different team members to be able to work on different things, and for PRs not to have endless merge conflicts. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that some of the features, they're sort of split by things that appear on the screen. So some of the things are to do with the canvas, which doesn't always appear on the screen. Some of it is split by, I don't know, it's been a while since I actually looked at the Viz repo. What other features do we use machines for? Oh, like auth, for instance, which doesn't appear on every screen. So yeah, sometimes we just need them to be modular so that we can pull them apart and only provide them for certain pages. And let me think, are there any other reasons? Are there any reasons why just having everything in the global state would be bad?
Not necessarily. It seems like a good refactor target, but just something we haven't done yet.
Yeah. So that's that. Sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Oh no, you carry on.
Well, it's a shame because I run out of things to say.
Okay, so a follow-up question from Horacio. Now, this has come with a code example, but we should be able to explain anyway. He says, I find a better pattern to let a child machine communicate to a parent machine instead of getting the parent machine reference from outside and sending an event directly. Is this something that resonates with you all too?
David, you want to grab that one?
So can you, I wish I saw the question on the screen. Kid, can you say it again?
I'll say it again.
Okay.
Because if you didn't hear it, then everyone else didn't either.
Right.
I find a better pattern to let a child machine communicate to a parent machine instead of getting the parent machine reference from outside and send an event directly. Is this something that resonates with you?
All right. So, yeah, I'm trying to parse that question still.
I've got a, if we share my screen, I've just pulled his code example up onto.
Okay, nice one.
So what we've got here is Horatio is saying, kind of there's a slight semantic difference here between, let's say that we've got a child machine and we've got a parent machine. So I'm just going to pull this in to just change the syntax a little bit. In the first example, the child machine is sort of declaratively saying send parent using the send parent action that it gets from XState. Why am I auto importing like that? That has no relevance other than just I've been trained by TypeScript to just get rid of that red line. That's just ridiculous. And I think what Horatio is saying is he's saying that he doesn't prefer this approach. He actually prefers this approach where you have a, oh, that's interesting. Because there's what parent service.send. Yeah, I think because what would be the natural thing that I would think from this is instead of having send parent in there, you would implement it like in a child, for instance. You would say actions notify parents, for instance, and then you would have a reference to the parents, and you would say like parent service dot send something parent. Now, I see why that's kind of appealing, actually, because if you have a reference to the parent service there, for instance, let's say you're in like a child component in React or something, then this call will be type safe. So this send, you'll get kind of autocomplete on that. Whereas send parent, it's fairly difficult to type in TypeScript.
Yeah,
I'm interested, Horatio, if I got the question right. Or if I'm
he says it's the other way around. Said prefers the child machine communicating internally to its parent instead of getting the parent reference in React and sending it directly.
Got you. Okay, cool. So he does prefer this instead of this. Yeah, and I can see why, because this is visualizable, right? So you've got a send to parent here, which is cool. And the way that you pass in the parent into this child machine, for instance, would be, let's say that you've got const service equals use interpret child machine. Then you would pass in the parent like this, parent parent service, which is kind of like a little sort of hacky way to do it, but it actually works quite well.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, shouldn't be preferred.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to just manage your child machine and parent machine by spawning, right?
But yeah, it is true that it's not type safe to just send parents. So yeah, that's something that the way that actor model frameworks like Akka solved it is that instead of just trying to strongly type the parent, when you create the child actor, you're also passing in a reference to the parents. And I think that there's a PR in the works that I've been working on where you have a reference to self, and you could pass that self reference to, just any child that you spawn or invoke.
Got you. Okay, yeah.
And then that would make things type safe, would make things easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so to finish Horatio's point, basically, that makes sense that you feel that this is a better thing to do, because I think this is what XState wants you to do more naturally. That's the way the API is designed. That's the way that the visualization works.
Cool. I think a relevant question from Damien is, at the minute there is multiple patterns / ways of declaring things within XState. Is this something that will be reduced as the API gets matured? Apologies if this has already been covered.
Oh, absolutely. So most of the things in V4 are things that people have been using for many years now. In fact, we've been on XState version 4 for the last, I think like 3 years or so. But we are getting closer to V5. I just merged in a major PR for a huge actions refactor. I think it touched like 67 files I'm seeing here. So it is a huge step towards just getting a V5 alpha out the door. But yeah, what we're doing is like we're going through the Discord and just seeing, the various usage on GitHub and the issues that arise, and we're seeing like, okay, which patterns are people using, which patterns are people having a difficult time with, and just trying to consolidate like what is one good pattern for like a specific set of use cases, so that we don't have to say, oh, you could do it this way or that way or that way, because the reason that it is like that right now is just because, we can't easily delete stuff in the current major version. We have to wait till the next major version to say, this is not allowed, you can't do this, and just be stricter with, specific patterns for different use cases. So yes, it is something that is going to consolidate as XState matures.
It's also a documentation thing too, right?
Yeah.
Because we can prioritize different things in the documentation and say, this is the cool way, do it the cool way, or do it this kind of several other sort of maybe hacky ways, and that's kind of at the moment, the documentation sort of treats all things as equal. It's kind of like a reference, and so you have this way, and then you click through, and there's another way, and then you click through, and there's another way. Whereas when we refine that more, we can choose our favorite ways, because we do have favorites, definitely. And I think we do have recommendations for XState users. They're just not very visible at the moment.
Yeah, and maybe we'll be able to be blogging the alternative ways and the use cases and reasoning behind them as well.
Yep. Yeah, I know Laura and Farzad have been working on the XState blog. So we're going to be publishing all of our favorite ways there. So stay tuned.
Yeah, Farzad just wrote a really cool little CLI tool for us to be creating new blog posts really quickly. So going to have no excuses not to be writing lots of great blog posts.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the first one would be like an XState style guide. I'd love to read that one.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Something for the community can really just reference and
And another fabulous question from Horacio. Actually, just before I ask this, I'm going to say again, if you want to join in on these really interesting discussions, you can join our Discord at discord.gg/xstate. This is where a lot of these discussions are going on. And because he says, I was reading about the receptionist pattern in the ideas channel, and I was wondering, what is the benefit of having a global machine with extra functions over having a singleton that stores all the machine references and sends messages to them?
Is this in reference to the receptionist pattern? Let me take a look.
And I'm just going to include a little banner there that has a little code example that he included.
Oh, okay. So the inspiration for the receptionist, and by the way, this is just an idea, this isn't something that we're planning on implementing soon, is the fact that right now, if you want to communicate between children or just other actors within the same system, that you have to have either a reference to them, or you have to tell the parent, and the parent has to tell the other actor. So you could sort of imagine this like in a workplace setting. Like if you need to communicate something to just some arbitrary worker, then you might have to be forced to tell your manager, and the manager has to tell their manager, and that manager has to tell like a worker or something like that. And really what you want sometimes, not all the time, is direct communication. And that direct communication might be hard to orchestrate if you don't already have a reference. And even getting that reference might be difficult, because you have to basically traverse the tree, pass the reference up, have that parent pass reference down, so that, you receive that reference. But with a receptionist, it's more like, as an actor, you could register yourself and say, hey, my name is this, make me discoverable. And so another actor might be like, hey, I want to talk to this person or this actor. I know its name. I just don't have a reference to it. And the receptionist can be like, okay, I have a reference to it. Here you go. And so this just makes that pattern a lot easier. Of course, you could do this manually right now. But again, there's a lot of like passing back and forth through the tree, and it gets really complicated. And so I see why Akka implemented it, and that's something that we're also thinking about doing.
Cool. Another one from Horacio, and this time in the live comments. So he's here to listen to the answers of the questions. I already told him that this is an Horacio special today. He said, having a way to embed the visualizer in documentation pages would be useful for apps that use XState. We can already do this. And actually, if David or Matt, could one of you possibly just quickly show us on the Viz how you can do that using embed mode?
Yes, I'll grab that.
Thank
Just
you.
share my screen. There's also one
Because it's really cool.
It's super cool. This is Farzad's embedded mode, TM. And we already have this, actually. So let me see if I can find one of the... I actually made a PR to Core the other day that I think it was in hierarchical state nodes or something, that took all the previous examples that were using the old visualizer and now embedded them using the new visualizer. So here we go. We have the machine above just translated into here, which is rather lovely. How did I make this work? You can go to stately.ai.viz and you can, let's just make a new example, data fetch, and we can save this, and then we can go share, embed, and you can see exactly how it's going to look inside the embed. So you can either have the viz, or you can have panels like this. So you can choose which panel you like. Let's choose the state panel, for instance. Or you can choose the entire thing. This kind of looks a bit sort of wacky here. But let's say it's bigger, then you would make it bigger. And you have the link to copy just there. And you can choose all sorts of things, like making the editor read-only and all that kind of stuff. And there you go. You can just embed that on your website and you're good to go. I think you can even do this if you're feeling really clever. You can even do this with inspect mode as well. I've been investigating this for XState catalogers, like to upgrade it to the new thing, where you can specify Stately AI viz embed and do like inspect like this, and it will it will put it in an iframe or something similar, or you can do inspect. But basically, there's a way you can make the current version of XState inspect work with the embedded mode as well.
Yeah, and also there's the open graph images too that you've made, Matt, which you can also, so you can share just an image version. If all you want to embed is a little viz, you can get an image URL from that copy image URL. And it takes a second to generate it just to begin with. After that, it's nice and quick. And that's a live updating image. So if you update your machine, it will also be updated in the image too.
Yeah, it's kind of
and that is Matt's handiwork.
Yeah. There we go. There we go.
So with the iframe, if you use XState inspect, then you just have to add this, which is iframe data XState, and then you're good to go. The way that I've been doing it, just because it takes extra work to make an iframe look nice on your page, especially when you're developing an actual application where you can't neatly fit an iframe there, is just opening it up in a separate window. But if you want to use an iframe, then that's all you have to add.
And the docs
and I found...
Go ahead, Laura.
I found some pretty cool ways. If you're using embed mode and you want a bit more control over how the layout is, you can use multiple embeds for the same machine on your page in different ways. So if you want to have the viz and above and the code below or something like that, you could just use multiple embeds and it works really well.
Absolutely. There's lots of docs on the visualizer written by Laura that are just here. XState docs, visualizer, all this sort of stuff.
Now, Timothy asks, if I just go back to seeing us, there we go. Any plans to support base64 source like the TypeScript playground for embed?
I think that's a good idea.
I mean, think about this. You would do something like Stately AI viz circ equal or viz embed. So you can see, oh, you can't see my screen, sorry.
Oh, I'll put you back up. There you go.
There you go. So how do I make this as big as possible? Just literally need a line of text.
Make window smaller.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go. I'll do this. Bam, 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 bam. Huge. So you do something like HBS, stately.ai, viz, embed, and then source will be the base64 source like this. So I think this is intriguing. This is definitely pretty cool because you could just generate open graph images based on your code, and this will be something that we do eventually because we're thinking, how can we, as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, turn your code into a diagram, you know what I mean? Without you having to go into the viz, without you having to do all that stuff. So the most amazing thing would be for you to just like ping an API and just get an image back, like, or just let's say embed.jpg source this, and you get back, or JPEGs. Who uses JPEGs anymore? PNG, SVG, whatever. And you would just get back your source, the image. So yeah, I mean, we're definitely thinking about this. We just have a million other ideas to sift through.
Yep.
So many ideas. Going all the way back to the beginning, because Matthew James Doroshe did ask a question, and I did take note of it at the time. I was just finding a good time to ask it. And there was, on a podcast, I heard David mention a plan to write a book that would be something like an updated version of constructing the interface with Statecharts. Is that just a hopeful future, or is there some momentum behind it?
Yeah, so this is something that I mentioned not only in the podcast, but in past office hours that I'm slowly working towards. And that's just collecting material for basically making a modern version of that book, constructing the user interface with Statecharts, and just making it sort of like an online guide. The first part of that is basically a front-end master's. So I recently did a workshop on teaching you the basics of state machines and Statecharts, and even the actor model with XState, and putting it in a vanilla JavaScript app. It's a cool little media player that has all sorts of functionality and surprisingly touches so many different parts of Statecharts and shows how they're useful. So definitely check that out. That's basically going to be a small part of what I'll eventually work on probably next year. Books take a long time to write. Plus, I don't have that much time to write it. So it is a slow work in progress. But yeah, it is something that I am actively working on.
Hopefully, a lot of the other work you're doing will contribute to that as well, I think.
Exactly, yeah.
It'd be fantastic. So if anyone else has any questions, you can ask us on our Discord in the Office Hours channel. You can send us a tweet using #StateTheOfficeHours, or ask us a question in the live comments on YouTube. As Eric said, Base64 would make bug reporting and support much easier. I love a good TS Playground link on Twitter.
Yep. And so the only downside of Base64, which isn't really a downside, it's more of a pre-feature, is that you can't edit a Base64. Like, you have no ownership of it. It belongs to Anonymous. So we still want to encourage people to log in and actually save their machines to the registry, where they could add descriptions and save them to their favorites. And we do have some upcoming improvements to the registry that's going to make it a lot easier to find machines, see your favorites, and all sorts of other cool things. But Base64 is still a good thing to support.
Yeah, I'm imagining it would be more like an internal tool. Like something that we expose via, let's say, like a GitHub bot that could come and comment on your PRs and just like throw an image up there for what changed. For that we would need Base64, but we probably wouldn't. Like, you could use it, but we might not expose it to everybody, because it would just pass your file into a machine, for instance, and then just ping it up to the API.
That'd be super cool. And that's something we've also been thinking about, is diffing machines. Or just having a visual representation of, here's how your state machine changed. Because trying to visually parse the JSON is a little bit painful. But since machines are a visual formalism, we could just have a thing where it's like, this node changed, this node moved here, and make it really easy to visualize.
Yeah. There's a great PR by Andorus, actually. He was PRing something to the Gatsby build process, because that's where he lives in your node modules. And they use Statecharts a lot, and they use XState a lot. And it was just literally a tiny little change to the way that it was monitoring some events. And he just did, okay, here it was before, here it was after, and got the PR merged basically from that. And it's just beautiful to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. Speaking of Andorist, John said, the receptionist pattern sounds like a type safety nightmare. Thoughts and prayers, Andorist.
We'd find ways to make it type safe. Again, this is probably going to be one of those things that I experiment with late December, while everyone is just on vacation and, just relaxing, sipping on coffee and playing around with this. But yeah, when we do these new features, our number one goal is type safety. And that wasn't always the case. XState version 3 was mostly JavaScript ported over to TypeScript eventually, and XState version 4 just carried a lot of that over. So now with new features in the upcoming version 5, we're able to think about TypeScript first. And that's going to improve a lot of things. So, yeah.
Cool. Now, does anyone have anything else that they wanted to share this week before we wrap it up?
I think I'm good. My chocolate bar is calling me.
I'm good as well.
Great. Well, it was lovely seeing you all again, and we will catch you at exactly the same time again next week. If you have any questions, you can always get in there ahead of time like Horacio did and get into our Discord office hours channel, or ask us questions on Twitter or on here. We will see them all and we will respond to them all. So we will see you again next week. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.